Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Simon Lehman from AJL Atelier. I feel honored and I'm really happy to be part of the Vacation Rental World Summit 2020. My session will be talking about profitability versus revenue, the road ahead for your business. It's been a challenging time the last few months with very little visibility. And at AJL Atelier, we always talked about how important profitability in our industry really is versus revenue. It's not all about growth. It's not all about revenue. At the end of the day, if we want to survive in a very tough environment, very competitive environment, and an environment with a lot of uncertainties, it's very challenging. And now we want to talk about profitability and what's the difference is between revenue and profitability and what you can do in order to make sure that you make the right business decisions, that the business that you run with the properties that you have are actually profitable and not just providing you with revenue. For that purpose, we have put together a great presentation, which we would like now to share with you. So let me share the screen. As we said, profitability versus revenue. It has been a great conversation for the last few months, and we're all starting to understand what the difference is. And in our presentation, we would like to highlight that accordingly. So let me go through the agenda first. First of all, we're going to talk about in vacation rental, revenue management isn't enough. And why is that not enough? So we elaborate on the different cost structures and then your P&L. Then we talk about cost and complexity of that. And how do we embrace them and make sure we allocate them so we can make smart strategic decisions. And then last, but definitely not least, we talk about predictive modeling, key to profitability, scale, and therefore happiness. Once again, profitability is the oxygen for our industry in order to survive. And it's not about growth. It's not about all consolidation. It's how do I run a profitable vacation rental business? So as we said, revenue isn't enough. And we need to understand that even in today's world, we're having bookings that actually do not provide us with a positive gross margin contribution or not even a positive net result. So we believe at AJL Atelier that the revenue management in vacation rental is simply broken. And we are now elaborating what we can do about that. So, we need to understand the differences between the different costs that we have in our businesses and how we're going to allocate them accordingly to our business to make smart decisions. We have started to build our own practices in how we solve our pain points, which are for sure totally different from hotels or airlines. The techniques that we have adopted from hotels and airlines is totally wrong. And why is that? Because we have a different cost structure. Airlines and hotels, they have very high fixed costs because they operate, let's say, a route from Zurich to New York, and with a plane, with a set crew, it has set amount of fuels, it has set amount of landing costs and handling costs. So the number of passengers that are on the plane actually only provide incremental variable costs to the total or overall fixed costs. The same is happening in a hotel. A hotel has a certain minimum number of staff, has very high fixed costs to operate, and every incremental bed that is sold is incremental contribution to the gross margin, and therefore also to the bottom line. For that purpose, hotels and airlines have actually disconnected revenue management entirely from the cost management and everything else. So revenue managers, they have a bandwidth that they can operate in, and everything that they provide in additional bookings or sell seats will contribute ultimately to a better gross contribution. Now, around our industry, it's totally different. In our industry, each booking actually drives a lot more variable costs than fixed costs. So our fixed costs in vacation rental are much lower. And every booking that we generate for a property will actually create a lot more variable costs in terms of check-in, check-out, cleaning, commission for distribution, cost for the property, et cetera, et cetera. So interesting enough, on the models that we have created so far with our customers, we realize it's actually entirely the opposite. So when we have about 70 to 80% fixed costs in airlines and hotels, we have about 70 to 80% variable costs in the vacation rental industry and only 30% fixed costs versus 30% variable costs on airlines and hotels. And that technique we have adopted for our industry. And for sure, when you understand how cost allocation works, it doesn't make sense for that to be the same. So let's go a little bit further on that. So revenue a vanity metric, we call that can be hidden, hide the truth. For sure, they can hide the truth. Because what we look at is revenue. Then we deduct our cost of sales, and then we come to our gross margin. Then we deduct our operating costs and expenses, and then we come to an operating profit. And then we deduct our other expenses and potentially tax, and we derive to our net profit. And this is normally how we do it. But we don't really understand the itemized cost that we have in our business and what are they related to overall. So let's take a practical example here for two different types of property managers with two different types of ADRs. One is that creates obviously a net contribution versus like actually a net profit, and the other one does have a positive profit. Yes, it is on a different type of ADR, but when we need to take revenue and occupancy into consideration, and it still can create a loss if we don't understand what our booking costs are versus our cost of sales and how do they derive. So with two different examples, we can show clearly that the one who is actually looking at reaches the same occupancy but increases profits while being more competitive, actually at the end of the day has a positive profit in its business. And we will show you some more examples in how these cost allocations are taking place and how you can become extremely smart in making the decisions for your business. So we need to embrace cost complexity. We have a very complex business which has a lot of different cost drivers, and we need to start breaking them down. So while affronting costs in details is the only path to profitability and sustainable scaling. That's the absolute key. When we consult with property managers, in a lot of cases, they have, or in most cases, they totally disconnect their revenue management, and the revenue managers do not understand what the cost drivers of their business really is. They just look at the comp set analysis, they look at supply and demand models, and then they basically look at certain events that are triggered higher rates, and they look what the competition is doing. And that's how they set the price. But they don't even know what a check-in and a check-out costs. They don't even know what cleaning costs. They don't even know how much costs are driven by each booking for a particular property. So we need to start understanding that on a property level in order to make the right decisions for the portfolio going forward. So the way we look at this is that we separate the macro costs in the vacation rental industry in three different types. So one is the costs that are related to the property, one is related to the management of the property, and the third is what costs us to create the booking. The granularity is extremely necessary. It can be very intensive and tiresome to do so, but once you have done that, you need to check your allocations and your cost granularity only on a regular basis to make sure if certain metrics have changed over time so they can be adjusted accordingly. But it needs to be done, and the current model is sustainable, and we need to understand under which parameters are the costs, is the business sustainable. In a lot of cases, it's already that piece is missing, that we don't really know what our cost drivers are and where we can potentially save costs. So when we look at the unit service cost and the total service costs of a business, and these are real numbers of a property manager with about 150 units that we have been able to analyze and allocate accordingly. So as we said, we need to embrace the granularity, makes the difference in how we run our business. Typical cost and analysis splits property costs, management costs, and booking costs, as we alluded to just in the previous slide. It's a start, but granularity is necessary to understand if the current model is sustainable and under what parameters. This allows to calculate the unit cost for a booking at a property level and therefore the entire portfolio. And I think that's extremely relevant. At the moment, we understand gross margins on bookings, but we don't know what the profitability is. So let us look at that cost. So in this particular case, we're seeing that 50% of the costs are coming from cleaning and housekeeping. 40% come from cost of sales, third-party bookings. And the other one, the green bit, are cost of sales for direct marketing, what we get as direct costs, and then cost of sales to repeat customers as well. And 6% overall. Check-in and check-in handling is 6%, and then laundry is only 1% of the total cost in this particular case. So yes, as we said, costs are extremely complex. So macro costs we talked about, and then we are splitting them into different categories. So let's look at the property cost first. So what do we allocate in our algorithm to the property costs? We allocate 24/7 support to owners, emergency costs, homeowner payments, insurance, property costs, listings, etc., etc. So this is everything that is related to the actual property. Of course, in this particular case, we have a 95% is homeowner costs, and then we have some energy costs associated to it, which can trigger quite a bit of additional costs if we don't, if we're not aware of those. The management costs we can split in even more parameters as well. So we have advisory services. We have, for example, capital expenditure that we need to take in consideration, costs that we pay to channel managers, cost of products and materials, costs we pay for our CRM, our dynamic pricing tool, travel expense, marketing, and occupancy management. So interesting enough, you can see already quite a bit of vary of different costs. In this particular case, the CRM is actually 8% of the overall cost. And also cost of products and materials and CapEx are 38%. So this particular model obviously shows you that it's a rent-to-rent product, which means it has quite a bit of CapEx because it actually manages the leases directly. Then, last but definitely not least, what are the service costs? And here it becomes really variable in the service costs. So check-in, check-out handling. So we need to really go down deep in calculating what does a check-in and a check-out costs. And maybe you can, if you want to start automating that piece, you need to know what their check-in and check-out handling costs are. What are your manpowers? What does it cost per check-in and per unit to actually do that service? And maybe you can handle that differently. But before we don't do this cost allocation, you cannot do a return of investment calculation. Then we have cleaning, housekeeping, cost of sales, third-party bookings, cost of sales for direct marketing, and cost of sales for repeat customers as well. At the moment, we throw everything into one bucket. And one thing we would like to remember here is that there's a lot of conversation going on about, increasing direct bookings, being less reliable in OTAs. But before we start building a distribution strategy, we also need to understand what our distribution costs are per channel, broken down, again, on a unit level. So now I want to go deeper into the predictive model. I mean, this is where the Holy Grail pretty much lies. How predictive can we build a model to make sure that every booking we generate on every unit that we have in our portfolio is providing us with not just a positive gross margin contribution, but also provides us with a profitable at the bottom end? So to grow sustainably, property managers need to forecast accurately revenues, costs, and then hopefully as well profits. So it's not just about creating occupancy for your owners. Yes, of course, that's always challenging. We have a lot of debates with that with our property managers where they're pushing to create occupancy. So something is coming in for the property manager, for the property owner as well, that we continually provide revenue. But at the end of the day, you also need to make sure that you're running a profitable business. And just to create revenue for your homeowners, in a lot of cases, is not good enough. And of course, not sustainable. Of course, the property managers would like to provide as many bookings and occupancy to their property owners. They need to keep them. They don't want to have increased churn rates because that, again, increases cost. And obviously, properties are our most important product that we sell to our guests. But we also need to be mindful that just providing revenue to property owners is not good enough if it doesn't provide profit to your business for you to continue operation and therefore serve customers accordingly. We say, when you look at the P&L, it's already too late. What does that mean? You need to understand your costs before they actually hit the P&L. When you read the P&L, it's too late, especially in the long cycles of property rental. Let us not forget, we're in a seasonal business. We need to look at months and months ahead. When do we onboard a property? When is a property becoming productive? When does it start generating revenue? There's already costs associated in bringing properties on. We have seen property managers who are bringing on properties regardless, don't even understand in terms of, hey, what type of properties do we really need? What are the features that the property needs? And our algorithm is actually taking care of that and also looking at your property features in order to make sure that you can, first of all, allocate your costs according to your property specifications, but also what runs better than others. Another one we can talk about is obviously property density. If a property manager is active in one particular region, he needs to think about, what is profitable for me in terms of unit density, how far can the properties be apart, and we can still scale cleaning, we can still scale check-in and check-out costs and home maintenance, etc., etc. So we need to be careful of not just being opportunistic when we're looking at our portfolio and the quality of the portfolio, the location of the portfolio, the type of the portfolio. One thing that we have seen in recent times is that property managers who are extremely focused on the type of product that they have are definitely more successful. So we know companies who just have villas with pool, nothing else, at the right place, and do not take any others that do not fulfill their key criteria, because that's how their business is set up. That's how their cost management is set up. That's how the customer expectation is being fulfilled. When booking with them, that's what they do, and that's what they're best at. They're not tempted by taking apartments or any other type of inventory because their core is villas with pools. So I think you need to be, we need to be careful of not just being opportunistic by taking on properties with even good contracts, even good gross margin with owners. At the end of the day, it needs to fit into your entire cost calculation and the way you plan your business going forward. So let us move on to the next slide. So why a predictive model? Without analysis, you cannot grow sustainable. That is something that I've just alluded to in terms of inventory, in terms of cost allocation that we're growing a business to. And if we don't analyze that on a constant recurring basis, it is very, very difficult to grow sustainably. We have seen cases where actually property managers became unprofitable while scaling their business to more properties, because all of a sudden they had a different unit density mix, they had different quality types, which created more customer service calls, which created more trouble. Cleaning was a challenge because they could not use their own cleaning crew. And when do we think about outsourcing or insourcing cleaning? What is the difference? You know, you can, if you have your in-source cleaning costs, then it's a fixed cost that you have, and then you can also only clean so many units. If that goes above a certain threshold, you need to start outsourcing cleaning. But then all of a sudden, cleaning becomes a variable. Why? Because obviously you only pay for cleaning of properties that are being used, so therefore it's a variable cost. But if you have cleaning in-source, it's clearly a fixed cost because you have a cleaning team. If they work or not, if they're bookings or not, it's a fixed cost. So these things we need to understand and take into consideration. The same goes for technology, for example. One thing that we love about our industry, and we always reiterate to, is that each property in our business is unique. But a number of parameters can help to predict its performance. And I alluded to that: style, bids, location, you know, pool, amenities, everything else can already help you to predict its performance. And one thing that is extremely important, that we're looking at data from the market, from the industry, and not just about booking data. We need to know, we need to understand a lot more, especially going forward. Also, guest demographics, where are the guests coming from? What is the booking patterns, etc. At the moment, it's very challenging to predict that because we have a totally different consumer behavior than we had 6 months ago. And therefore, data that we use to power our algorithm has become absolutely important. So we understand the different supply and demand models. So one thing that we need to mention here, we are not reinventing revenue management. That is a piece that is here to stay. That model is here in terms of how do you want to do pricing. But what we do is we actually look at the business bottom up. We look at the costs first before we make strategic decisions in how we want to price our units. So your model must reliably predict a property's profit potential. And is it worth investing in it at all? That's something we have not even thought about. You know, is it worth investing in a property to make it actually provide better ADRs, being more profitable for us? And we need to run costs against it to make that analysis and make decisions in how this works. So if you look at the different unit variable costs and ADRs, this is interesting. So, you know, there's properties that can potentially drive a far higher unit variable cost than what the ADR is. So in this particular instance, we have profitable properties and we have not so profitable properties. So when you look at the first one, who has an ADR of 135 and has 103 variable costs, that means that property is for sure not going to be profitable in any case whatsoever. And the last one as well, we have costs of over 400 euros, and every booking basically creates a loss because the variable costs for this particular unit are exponentially high. So that analysis needs to be done on a very regular basis to make sure that whatever you price and whatever costs are on unit level are in tune. So unit variable costs and ADR need to be clearly differentiated to understand what is the profitability per particular unit. So managed cost of acquisition is another one. Managed cost of acquisition is something that this industry has not addressed whatsoever. We had a very, very few cases of our customers we had worked with and other industry players who could give us their acquisition costs of properties within a flash. They can't. They maybe take only advertising costs into consideration for what they need to generate leads for owners to come to their platform. But of course, there's a lot more associated with actually onboarding a property. You need to write content, you need to take photos, you negotiate a contract with homeowners. So there's time involved, there's time and resource involved that in most cases, vacation rental companies do not take in consideration at all. What does it cost to onboard a property? How fast can you onboard? Onboarding is key. The quicker you have your property onboarded, the quicker it starts generating revenue and hopefully positive contribution and positive profit as well. Ongoing management, making sure it's profitable. How much time do we need to allocate? Thus, if the property is of high quality, it generates less customer complaints and everything else. Customer complaints can be very, very costly, not just on customer service, call centers, etc., but actually on the business overall. So we know we need to have good inventory that triggers good reviews and therefore little customer inquiries. How well do you describe your property? How well is the text written? Is it understandable? Can you get the guest all the information online without calling you, without asking questions that will cost you money? Is your product description really up to scratch? These have all direct impact on your overall operating costs. Having good content will reduce the interface to potential guests and therefore higher profits. So all these things we need to take in consideration in advance when we make decisions. We have seen very clustered cost allocations in the past. In most cases, it's personnel. Okay, these are my staff costs of my business. Okay, how much of that cost is in marketing? How much is in finance? How much is in HR? How much is in property maintenance? How much is in cleaning and other areas of the business? Do we allocate these costs to the particular cost drivers? And if you do that, then you start understanding what a true cost of customer acquisition is. You start to understand what the true cost of cleaning and maintenance is. You start to understand all the different pieces that we talked about under section 2 when we do these, when we break up these 3 different types of cost drivers: costs that are allocated to the property, costs that are allocated to the management of the property, and costs that are allocated to the booking as well. And that is something absolutely key. Also in terms of IT, it's an interesting one. When we talk to property managers and ask, what are your IT costs? Then they say, well, it's something like 7 or 8% of my gross booking revenue. Is that good enough? No, it's not, because we need to start differentiating what type of technology do we actually use to power our business. So we use a CRM. Well, that has definitely nothing to do with the property cost. The CRM may be allocated to the booking site. That's where we engage with the customers. If we want to make a choice, for example, which I've mentioned earlier, is if we want to think about introducing an automated door lock, if we want to introduce a software that allows us to do remote check-ins by providing automated door locks, key codes to our guests, we save a tremendous amount of money on check-in and check-out costs. People coming to your office, they go directly to the unit. Yes, there is initial investment, but if you haven't done the cost allocation on understanding your check-in and check-out costs, it's becoming extremely challenging to make a return of investment calculation to say, hey, if I do this, I'm going to save X amount of money because I don't need to have office hours anymore. I can reduce my rent. I provide a better guest experience because guests can go directly to the unit. We send them the key codes directly to their mobile phone. And if they have anything, they can communicate with us on a chat option. But it's becoming seamless. And I think in today's times, the guests want to go directly to units. They want to be seamless, interactless. They don't want to interact with anybody. But for that decision to be made, you need to understand your true costs of what it is with you today that is involved in a check-in and a checkout. And that obviously starts a lot earlier than just with handing over the key. That already starts with sending out emails with payment confirmation and then address confirmation. So there's still a lot of email exchanging with the pre-check-in process. That triggers a lot of cost. There's manpower behind it, customer service, you name it. You can potentially automate the entire process after a booking has been made. Entirely automated, meaning the booking is made, And then all these emails are triggered automatically through your PMS or any other type of technology you can use to automate that process. But if you want to make that investment, you need to know what your costs are today. So IT costs alone don't do it. You need to itemize them according to all the different things that you need to run your business. So recovery depends on more sustainable practices, without a doubt. From maximizing revenues first, and then think about costs later. That is how it's done, and we think it's totally broken. But what we think about is you need to understand costs first, and then maximize profits now or thereafter. That's what it's all about. So making sure that you understand how your costs grow and how therefore also your revenue grows. And obviously, without a doubt, costs and revenue do not grow in line. No surprise to you. So it doesn't mean that, you need to set up a scalable business. And we always talk about scale, right? Scale actually means not just growing the revenue and scaling a business. Scaling means that you scale a business that is in the revenue and the cost growth are not in line, but they're actually, the more units you can add, the more profits you're going to make. So that's why issues like property density is becoming extremely important. Make sure you're growing the right properties that do not let your cost explode. There are certain properties that might give you so much more cost to the business, and then all of a sudden your variable costs start to jump actively, and also your fixed costs will continue to grow. So you need to understand, how many units at what revenue can you add to your business without your fixed costs increasing, and keep your variable costs under control on a unit level. That's the absolutely key of building a profitable business going forward. So let's talk about growing revenue without managing costs in parallel is like trying to fill the Danaides barrel. And this is exactly what I just alluded to. You cannot just add on business units without understanding what are your cost drivers behind it. And there we make always big mistakes. Do we understand it in detail and know exactly what each unit costs in terms of trigger? Onboarding costs we talked about, customer acquisition costs, property acquisition costs. What does it really cost me to add one property after the other? And how quickly can I scale that and increase my profit? Because it could very well be, depending where you are, what type of units you operate, what are your locations, what's your current staff, what's your current cost, that you can probably scale 30, 40, 50 properties more without really increasing the true fixed costs additionally. And that's exactly where you need to look at. And obviously make sure it's not just running in parallel. It actually starts to get bigger and bigger, the difference. So your revenue goes up and your fixed costs stay pretty much in line. So that means you can scale your business profitable and not just in revenue. In our industry, we always talk about, this industry has scale. We want to scale our business. But what does that mean? We have seen so many urban STR companies who have raised a lot of money, and they all talk about scaling the unit count to the max, but none of them make profits. And I think now everybody has started to realize this is not about revenue growth. It's about profitability. It's very hard to raise capital in today's environment, especially with these type of scaling business plans where cost meets revenue is far away, and where the axis of cost and revenue are starting to go over each other, we're a long way away from that. And I think that's something that has brought us back to rethink, hey, running a profitable business that can still scale maybe at a slower rate is still better than just raising a ton of capital that is volatile, and you cannot, the revenue line does not come over your cost line. It's a run in a hamster's wheel. And we see that we need to understand our costs first before we can start growing our business and look at revenue. So let us look at pricing profitability. We talked about analyze and allocate cost to surface strategy. That's the key to it. So cost allocation. It is tiresome work. It's hard work, but it needs to be done. At least twice a year, you need to do your cost allocation extremely thoroughly in order to run this particular strategy. So once we have established an allocated cost, we can price in consequence. And this is important. That needs to be done first. What's the forecast profit on this booking? What's the forecasted profit of that particular booking that is coming in? If I tweak my pricing, how will costs and profit be impacted? We tweak prices, and we said that at the beginning of this presentation, that we price without even taking any costs into consideration at all. We might lower costs because we're desperate, because our occupancy is extremely low, but we don't even take in consideration that these bookings that you generate with these lower costs are actually not providing you a profitable, positive contribution to your business. So why do it at all? Just to please your homeowners? I think that's a dangerous strategy. So bottom rates aren't enough. Pricing must adapt according to the property costs and not, and of course on booking parameters. What are my booking parameters? So let's look at that analysis in particular, analyzing the profit of each booking. So what is profit? What is service costs? What are property costs? And then you start realizing, hey, this is the way we want to run this strategy. Seasonality models obviously need to being taken consideration as well. But if we don't understand that, it is very, very difficult to make profitable pricing going forward. So many factors impact a specific booking costs and therefore profit levels as well. So we talked about that cost structure of the business. Itemizing cost structure of the business. Anything that you have within your business, you can potentially allocate. Of course, you don't want to go too deep. If you start talking about allocating office materials and things like that, it's becoming challenging. But you could even think about office space. You have an office rent, and that is split between different departments, and each department has to carry its own office rent costs that are allocated to the department. And you'll be surprised what you find, who is really creating profitability and who is driving more cost than profitability to the business. Team contracts you need to think about. Technology that is involved, we talked about. The volume of bookings that you generate is an absolute key driver as well, because obviously volume of bookings generate a lot of additional variable costs. Cleaning, check-in, check-out, and others. Booking channel costs, market environment, seasonality, events, we talked about already. All these things need to be taken in consideration in order to do a profitable pricing allocation, to make sure you're running a profitable business. Our approach with AJL Profitability Solution is broken down in 4 different steps. Our clients love our fast-moving, non-nonsense approach. It's all about tangible values. So first of all, we look at the strategic setup, semi-automated setup of your company's characteristics, portfolio of homes, and costs. So we're sitting down with the property manager and we analyze the entire business in detail, so we understand what are their properties, where are they, how do they run their costs, and understand their entire P&L. Then we do cost analysis and allocation. This is where it becomes challenging. As we mentioned, we need to try to allocate as many costs in a feasible way, of course. There's certain things you can go into far too much detail, which we obviously don't need to do, but we need to do that on a regular basis. So giving profitability per property, group properties together, and then we also need to do the cost allocation on a company level. And of course, at the property level, as already indicated. Third stage, we need to look at revenue management and dynamic pricing. Our pricing adapts to your costs on a property level and each booking to maximize your profits. That's exactly what we do. And then last, but definitely not least, we look at company reporting performance. So we can provide real-time reports on profitability and all other metrics you would like to look at, accurate forecasts and easy predictive modeling on the basis of what we have shown to you before. So we can do a predictive modeling and see, depending on your overall targets in terms of profitability as well, in how you can price your units and on a booking level and a unit level going forward. So we are your go-to partner to drive profitability. AJL Atelier is a vacation rental and business consultancy with a global reach. We offer many different services. So one of which is obviously strategic consulting, which we talked about as a part of our AJL Profitability Solution. We also look at performance optimization and the profitability solution we have just talked about. And last, but definitely not least, we also provide financial services for M&A transactions and fundraising within our industry exclusively. So we have a wide range of products, which are actually starting at the strategic consulting, interesting enough. That's where we understand the challenges and the problems of property managers that they have. And in most cases, we can then start talking about profitability solutions and help them to optimize their performance in terms of services they provide, like cleaning, like other things, outsourcing, insourcing. We're looking at technology sourcing. That's an absolute massive piece of our consulting services, where we understand that the technology that they source might not be according to their requirements. The selection process has not been done very thoroughly. They deal with technology that does not fit the purpose. So therefore we analyze that and look at alternatives to fit their needs as well. So we have a full range of services which pretty much covers the 360 requirements of a property manager. And we're obviously happy to solve and serve your issues and questions and challenges as well. With that, it's been a great pleasure to bring AJL Profitability Solution to you in a far closer way. This is a world premiere for us at Vacation Rental World Summit 2020 to talk about this. At the moment, it's launched as a consulting service. In the future, it will be provided as a software as a service solution, which we're currently in development. So if you want to partner with us, if you want our expertise, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We have a great team located in several locations here in Europe. Looking forward to it. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And hopefully next year in 2021, we have time to meet each other again in person at the VRWS 2021, hopefully in Annecy. Take care, stay well, stay safe, and wishing you lots of success with your business.